The quiet of the Zarzwela palace that evening was almost too much for Princess Leonor to bear. The corridors, usually filled with the distant echo of staff footsteps or the occasional laugh from her sister Sophia, seemed to hold their breath with her. Tomorrow, the world will know. Tomorrow, Spain, Denmark, and every corner of the internet would wake up to headlines that would change her life forever. She was engaged, the wedding announcement was ready, and history was about to take notice. But before any of that could happen, before the formality of the official statement and the fanfare of photographers, there was one thing she felt she had to do. She sat at her writing desk, a stack of ivory stationery before her, the pen feeling heavier than usual in her hand. The palace staff had offered to have a formal letter drafted for her, something polished, something suitable for the archives, but Leonor had politely refused. This letter wasn't meant for the world to read. It wasn't a statement for history books or a press release. It was just for him. She dipped the pen into the ink, pausing for a long moment as though the words needed to be pulled from the very depths of her heart. "My dearest Christian," she began. Just writing his name made her smile, her breath catching in her throat as a wave of memories flooded over her. The first time they had met, two teenagers standing awkwardly during a state visit, their parents exchanging pleasantries nearby, she never imagined they would end up here. She thought of the summer trips, the carefully guarded moments they had managed to spend together away from the cameras, the quiet walks by the sea, the whispered conversations about duty, responsibility, and dreams. She wrote slowly, deliberately, each sentence carrying the weight of everything she had been too shy to say aloud. She thanked him for seeing her as a person before he ever saw her as a princess. She told him how his patience had taught her to breathe when the pressure of her future felt suffocating. She described the nights she had lain awake, thinking about the enormous responsibility that awaited her, and how just the sound of his voice had been enough to calm her fears. Tears blurred the ink as she wrote about the love that had grown between them, quietly at first, like a small flame that needed protecting from the wind, and then fiercely, brilliantly, until it was strong enough to light the path ahead. She confessed that she had never been more certain of anything than she was of him. Outside, the night deepened. Somewhere in the palace, Sophia was no doubt scrolling through her phone, aware of the coming announcement but mercifully giving her sister space. Queen Letizia had stopped by earlier, squeezing Leonor's hand, reminding her gently that she didn't have to carry the world alone. Her father had spoken with her too, with the quiet wisdom of a man who knew what it was to love someone deeply while being bound to a throne. Their support strengthened her, but this letter was about something that went beyond royal duty. She wrote about the future, not the grand ceremonies or the parades, but the ordinary days she longed for. Breakfasts in a sunlit kitchen. Long walks through the palace gardens after the crowds had gone home. The joy of raising a family together, watching their children grow up free yet prepared for the destiny they would inherit. Her words became a promise, that she would stand by him, not just as the future Queen of Spain but as the woman who loved him with every part of her being. She admitted her fears, that the world might be too harsh, that the scrutiny might sometimes feel unbearable, that there would be moments when duty would demand sacrifices neither of them wished to make. But she also reminded him of their shared strength, the quiet resilience that had carried them this far. When she finished, the letter was longer than she had intended, several pages filled front and back with looping script. She read it over once more, her chest tightening with emotion. She folded it carefully, sealing it with a small wax crest and placing it in an envelope. For a moment, she simply sat there, staring at it, her fingers resting lightly on the paper. It felt like she had poured her soul into it, and perhaps she had. That night, as the palace lights dimmed and the city of Madrid twinkled beyond the walls, Leonor slipped quietly into the corridor. A trusted aide was waiting, ready to ensure the letter made its way safely to Denmark before morning. When she handed it over, her hand lingered just a second longer than necessary, as if letting go of it was symbolic, a way of saying goodbye to the last piece of her old, private life. In Copenhagen, Prince Christian was seated at his own desk when the letter arrived. The Danish palace had been buzzing for days with preparations and discreet conversations about what was to come, but Christian had managed to carve out a moment of solitude. He recognized the handwriting instantly. His heart leapt, and for a long while he simply held the letter, as though the very weight of it brought him closer to her. When he finally broke the seal and began to read, the room fell silent except for the sound of paper rustling. Each line drew him deeper into her world, into the vulnerability she had shared with no one else. By the time he reached the final page, his eyes were wet. He read it again, slower this time, committing every word to memory. He sat back, breathing deeply, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. This was more than an engagement, more than a royal union. This was the meeting of two lives, two hearts choosing to walk side by side into an uncertain but beautiful future. He took out his own pen and paper, writing a short reply, not formal, not polished, but true. He told her that he loved her, that he was ready for whatever the future demanded, and that tomorrow, when the world learned their secret, he would be thinking only of her. By dawn, the letter was on its way back to Madrid. And when the palace released the announcement later that morning, accompanied by the official portraits and the first details of the wedding, the world reacted exactly as expected, with astonishment, excitement, and joy. But somewhere, far from the cameras and the endless commentary, Leonor sat by her window, holding Christian's reply close to her heart. The cheers of the crowd floated up from the streets of Madrid, but all she heard were his words, quiet and steady, reminding her that no matter how loud the world became, they had each other. The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning, interviews, and preparations. Designers and florists came and went, palace staff rushed about, and every magazine in Europe seemed to speculate on what she would wear. Yet, whenever she felt overwhelmed, Leonor would return to that letter, tucked safely away, reading it like a prayer. And though the wedding was still months away, though the path ahead was certain to be filled with both triumphs and challenges, she felt ready. She had written her heart on paper, and he had answered with his. For a princess destined to be queen, there was no greater certainty than that.